At Morales Family Grill, the scent of garlic and pan-seared peppers usually meant comfort. Tonight, it carried the sting of humiliation. Lucia Morales stood behind the counter, spoon hovering in midair, as her cousins laughed around the corner booth, the same booth where she'd once shelled peas with her father, who believed no recipe could fail if stirred with patience. "Lucia, these tamales taste like memory foam," Miguel cackled, shoving his plate theatrically toward her sister. Laughter erupted. Someone coughed, retirement food. Someone else said, "You should just let DoorDash handle it." Pop culture cruelty, seasoned with family familiarity. Lucia froze, cheeks burning hotter than the stove burners behind her. She'd spent 12 hours preparing for this so-called family tasting night, hoping to impress the very people who'd grown up eating her father's recipes. Yet here they were, mocking not just her cooking, but everything he'd taught her. She forced a polite smile. "I'll take that as feedback?" It was the kind of measured tone chefs used when they've run out of salt and patience in the same minute. When the laughter finally ebbed, she retreated into the kitchen. The back door slammed softly in relief behind her. For a moment, she let her shoulders sag. Grease hissed in the fryer like irritated applause. The neon sign humming through the window read Morales Family Grill since 1984. Her father's pride, her inheritance, and now apparently her punchline. Lucia stared at the peeling blue paint on the doorframe. Maybe they were right. Maybe nostalgia didn't work in modern taste buds. Or maybe she was simply serving the wrong audience. Later, after everyone left, she wiped down tables one last time. Each chair squeaked like a goodbye. The register drawer closed with a final metallic sigh. Lucia flipped the open sign to closed, but this time she left it that way. Permanently. She walked outside, locking up as the night wind lifted the faint aroma of cumin and roasted corn, her father's invisible handshake. "I am sorry, Poppy," she whispered to the darkness. "They don't taste what you cooked into this place." Then, quieter, "Maybe I can start something new. Maybe they'll come around when they're hungry for more than bragging rights." The streetlight caught the gleam of her key as she turned it for the last time. Somewhere deep inside her chest, fury and freedom began to blend, like oil and vinegar finally deciding to coexist. Lucia Morales had just closed her family restaurant, but something in her eyes said she was about to open a revolution. The following weeks tasted of ash and confusion. Mornings used to greet Lucia with the bustle of chopping onions, calling out orders, and her fryer's cheerful hiss. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator in her apartment kitchen and a single cup of bitter coffee that she never seemed to finish. She tried ignoring the voices of her family that replayed in her head, each laugh at her expense echoing louder in the quiet. The stillness became an empty dining room she couldn't stop walking through in her mind. She'd fallen into a pattern. Wake, scroll through recipes, stare at closed signed photos on her phone, and wonder whether she just erased her father's legacy with a single twist of a key. One chance phone call changed the rhythm. Her old friend Denise, who ran a catering company, needed someone reliable for weekend events. Lucia accepted, partly for the bills, partly because she missed the scent of challenge. Her first gig was a corporate luncheon whose menu included, ironically, her grandmother's empanadas, mass-produced and tasteless. She made them anyway, tears blurring the spices. Yet when a guest said, "Whoever cooked these actually cared," Lucia felt something small stir inside. The silence after the event was different now, softer, not punishing but thoughtful. She began spending late nights in her kitchenette, notebook open, trying new versions of the same old dishes, swapping white onions for sweet vidalias, roasting instead of frying. Each failed batch went into Tupperware labeled lesson. She dreamed of presenting her father's recipes in a way that would make both him and the modern crowd proud. Gradually, solitude became her sous chef. Without the chatter of critics, she could finally hear her own intentions simmering. She started collecting ideas like ingredients, handwritten family notes, customer compliments from her catering shifts, even online reviews of trendy cafes. Everything fed into one secret recipe, a vision where heritage didn't have to mean old-fashioned. And so, on a quiet Tuesday, just before dawn,
Lucia brewed her strongest espresso, opened her journal, and wrote a single sentence in block letters. "I'm not done cooking. I'm just preheating." She underlined it twice and smiled into the steam curling from her cup, the bitterness tasting a little more like courage this time. Lucia's revival began not with a grand announcement, but with the grocery list. One slow Tuesday evening, she spread her father's recipe cards across her coffee table like old photographs. Onion rings of ink stains framed his handwriting. More cumin if the crowd looks bored. She smiled. Her new crowd wouldn't be bored, that much she promised. Weeks of late-night testing followed. Salt measurements became prayers, every taste test a tiny act of rebellion. She scrolled through food blogs, reading profiles of chefs who blended heritage with innovation. "Fusion," she muttered. "I've been fusing my whole life. I just didn't get a marketing budget." Denise, the catering firm friend, noticed her spark returning. At the next event, when a guest praised Lucia's empanadas, Denise nudged her. "You could sell this. Not nostalgia, experience. The world's finally hungry for real roots." Those words cartwheeled through her head all night. Experience, roots. They sounded like the perfect name for a chain, or maybe a movement. She began sketching designs, bright interiors, open kitchens, menus printed like family journals. She'd call it Harvest Flame, a tribute to the passion that survives even after being burnt once. She devoured business tutorials between catering gigs, scribbling plans on napkins, micro-investor funding, local sourcing, social media previews to stir curiosity before lunch. In her headset during deliveries, she listened to entrepreneurial podcasts instead of playlists. Whenever she doubted herself, she'd replay her father's recorded voicemail, kept for years. "Mija, remember, good food doesn't beg to be loved. It loves first." Lucia took the quote literally. Each test dish carried her father's patient philosophy, but wore her own flair. Mole with citrus zest, hand-pressed tortillas dyed gold from turmeric, classic arroz con leche infused with cardamom. Home with a heartbeat. One night she bumped into Miguel, the cousin who'd once compared her tamales to memory foam, at the grocery store. He eyed her cart stacked with premium ingredients. "Starting over?" he smirked. "I'm starting up." She didn't elaborate, leaving him bewildered in aisle 7 as she pushed her cart towards Destiny and the dairy section. Back home, she opened a fresh notebook and wrote the timeline. Testing, 3 months. Soft launch, 6 months. New location, 18 months. She closed it like a sealed envelope to her future. When she finally turned off the kitchen light, tiny jars of spice gleamed on the counter, waiting like loyal soldiers for the battle to come.
6 months later, the old Morales family grill was unrecognizable. The peeling paint and flickering neon were gone. In their place blazed a clean bronze sign, Harvest Flame, Heritage Reimagined. The soft opening drew a modest crowd, friends, curious locals, even a few past catering clients. But to Lucia, it felt like a parade. Inside, the dining room glowed warm and modern. Clay red walls, mismatched wooden tables, candles tucked into recycled salsa jars. On the walls hung vintage photos of her father overseeing the grill, photos that now shared space with newly printed captions like, "Tradition is not imitation, it's memory made current." Lucia moved through the room in her apron, calm and deliberate. The air danced with the scent of roasted corn, lime, and something faintly sweet, the new flan recipe that had made even Denise weep. When the first customer's fork tapped against a plate, she flinched as if expecting more laughter, but instead came the sound she'd longed for. Delighted sighs, murmured approvals, the scrape of empty dishes. By week 3, food bloggers wandered in, lured by social media whispers about a woman resurrecting comfort food. One called her the culinary phoenix of Cedar Vale. Another wrote, "Harvest Flame proves that nostalgia can evolve." The reviews traveled faster than she could fry empanadas. She hired 2 assistants, both local women with backgrounds as rich as their recipes. The kitchen buzzed with purpose, spices snapping through the air like punctuation marks. One night, Denise handed her a laptop showing a modest line graph that tilted upward. "That, my friend, is your booking rate." She laughed, half from joy, half disbelief. "We're barely open a month." Dreams rise fastest when the heat's right. You set the temperature. Saturday brought a surprise. Her mother walked in, flanked by cousins Miguel and Rosa, the same critics who'd quoted sitcom lines about her cooking months earlier. They sat at a corner table, sheepish, eyes darting across the menu. Lucia approached, drying her hands on her apron. Rosa smiled nervously. "We heard the food's good." She handed them menus. "It's edible," she teased, graceful but firm. "Let's see what your taste buds think when pride isn't seasoning the plate." The meal stretched into stunned silence and, finally, humbled praise. Her mother dabbed tears with a napkin. Even Miguel mumbled, "Guess you found your spice rack." She only replied, "Guess I finally used it right." Outside, the evening buzzed with chatter. Customers waiting for tables spilled laughter into the street. Lucia stepped out to see the small crowd beneath the glowing sign. It flickered, not with irony, but pure promise. She took a breath that smelled of grilled corn and vindication. The new world was lit, and she was the spark. News travels faster than a rumor at a reunion. Within 2 months, Harvest Flame had become the newest gravitational pull of the Morales clan. Cousins who hadn't called in years now texted, "So proud of you," followed by, "Any chance we can get a discount?" Lucia smiled at the irony. Mockery had been free, but support suddenly came with coupons. She didn't hold grudges. She held reservations. Every relative's name went into the booking calendar like a controlled experiment in grace. When they arrived, that tangle of familiar faces, off-key laughter, and semi-genuine enthusiasm, Lucia greeted each one in person. "Table for 8? Wonderful," she said to Miguel and his entourage. "Just a heads up, the menu changed a little. We're charging extra for sarcasm now." Even he laughed, awkward but relieved. The restaurant shimmered with the kind of evening energy that feels like forgiveness in action. A bustling kitchen symphony of sizzling pans, quick footsteps, and the murmur of guests savoring something remarkable. Lucia plated dishes the way painters frame closure, carefully, tenderly, fully aware of the audience. During dessert, Rosa leaned across the table. "We didn't realize how much pressure you were under back then. We teased you instead of helping." Lucia paused, tasting her coffee before answering. Families taste different kinds of spice, some pleasant, some painful. What matters is what we cook with it after. Her mother, Elena, nodded quietly. "You always did take after your father. He'd be proud, mija." That was the compliment she had been waiting for all along. Not trendy praise, not magazine buzz, just that simple confession said with genuine warmth. Still, pride has a way of slipping into the cracks of success. While Lucia's guests enjoyed the present, social media reveled in her past. An old photo of the shuttered Morales Gamely grill circulated with the caption, "From closed sign to culinary star." Most comments cheered her on, but one anonymous remark read, "She betrayed tradition for profit." Lucia sought it late that night after closing. For a moment, old shame tried to creep back in. Then she shut her phone and whispered to herself, "Tradition didn't die, it evolved with me." The next morning, she added a small chalkboard near the entrance, handwritten in white cursive. "In memory of all who laughed and then learned to smile. A wink to the past, a nod to the future." Customers loved it. Her cousins photographed it for their own feeds. Lucia realized she didn't need to defend her legacy anymore. She just needed to keep feeding it. By the anniversary of Harvest Flame's opening, Lucia's world tasted like validation, sweet, smoky, and earned. The regional food magazine Taste Lines published a spread titled "From Mockery to Mastery: The Rise of Lucia Morales." The photo showed her in chef's whites, hair braided and streaked with a dash of gray like seasoned salt, eyes calm as simmering broth. She almost didn't believe it until her catering mentor, Denise, held up the issue and whooped, "You're on page 2, right before a Michelin feature. You're basically royalty." Lucia laughed, half embarrassed, half overjoyed. Royalty still has to mop at closing. But justice didn't come from press. It came that Friday evening, when Harvest Flame hosted its first anniversary gala. Investors mixed with locals, the mayor dropped in for casual congratulations, and a line of customers snaked out the door. On the center table sat a framed photo of her father, beside the original spatula, the one worn thin from decades of flipping tamales, now gleaming like a medal. Her family filled half the front row, once her critics, now her cheering section. Miguel even wore a custom apron reading, "Assistant Chef to the Queen." He'd printed it as a joke, but blushed when Lucia hugged him and said, "Finally earned that promotion." Mia, the youngest cousin, took the microphone for a toast. "To Lucia," she said, voice shaking from pride, "who turned a family insult into a family business model." Laughter rippled through the room, gentle and affectionate. "You taught us that tradition isn't fragile. It just needs new hands." Applause followed, the kind that rolls like a wave, unstoppable, generous, cleansing. Lucia's eyes blurred, and for one impossible second, she swore she saw her father standing by the kitchen door, nodding approval, apron dusted with flour, his smile still that same quiet kind. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up, microphone trembling slightly. "I thought closing Morales Grill meant I'd failed my family," she said. "But it turns out, closing it opened something else. It gave me room to cook with my heart again, to serve love instead of fear." She raised a glass of tamarind punch. "To every person who's ever been laughed out of their own dream, sometimes the mockery is just the universe preheating your oven." The cheers were loud enough to rattle silverware. When the last guest left, Lucia walked back into her spotless kitchen, undoing her apron. The stainless steel counters reflected her smile. Justice, she realized, isn't revenge. It's truth tasting the way it was always meant to. She placed the magazine cover beside her father's photo and whispered, "We did it, Poppy. They finally know what we were serving all along." The ovens clicked as they cooled, an applause all their own. When the rush of celebration faded, peace had its own flavor. It wasn't the sharp sweetness of victory or the fiery spice of ambition. It was soft, balanced, lingering, like the aftertaste of cinnamon on warm bread. Harvest Flame ran smoothly now, managed by staff she trusted. Saturday mornings belonged to Lucia again. She spent them in the open patio behind the restaurant, teaching neighborhood kids how to fold empanada dough. "Press, don't pinch," she said gently, guiding small hands. "Dough listens better to kindness than force." Their laughter rose into the lazy sunlight, a soundtrack that fit this new, unhurried version of success. Her family no longer came just to prove support. They came because they genuinely loved the food. Her mother sat by the window every Thursday with café de olla. Miguel washed dishes on weekends, whistling to prove he could. Even Denise announced that a third Harvest Flame location was ready to open across the state. She simply nodded, smiling in disbelief. "Guess I built a chain reaction," she joked, wiping her hands on an apron that had seen both failure and fame. That night, after closing, she poured herself a single glass of red wine and lit a smooth white candle beside her father's old spatula. The city outside hummed with life, neon signs blinking like resting stars. She whispered, "You'd laugh, Poppy. They said I turned comfort into a brand." She paused, smiling at the glow in the metal. "But really, I just kept feeding people love." She stood quiet for a moment, the light flickering against her face, and felt that same mix her father always said marked a perfect dish: humility and heat, blended until inseparable. If this story touched your heart, follow and subscribe to Kindred Echo, where every heartbreak finds its voice and every lesson blooms again.